The acceleration of information exchange, Varadi writes, has produced and is producing an effect of a pathological type on the individual human mind, and even more on the collective mind. Individuals are not in a position to process the immense and always growing mass of information that enters their computers, their cell phones, their television screens, their electronic diaries and their heads. However, it seems indispensable to follow. Recognize, evaluate, process all this information if you want to be efficient, competitive, victorious. The necessary time for paying attention to the flux of information is lacking. There's that double thing which produces the intense weariness and exhaustion. You feel not at the end of the day, but at the beginning of the day, as soon as you're on cyberspace, as soon as you're in cyberspace again, and you're being assailed with multiple demands immediately. You know, and it's the double thing if you know that it's actually impossible for you to deal with all of the demands that are made upon your attention, yet you feel that you ought to. For infants are bombarded with this kind of dreamy chaos of stimuli, which they have to learn to make into cause and effect. For Spinoza, freedom is the capacity to recognize the causal factors which impinge upon you. You become free only by recognizing the extent to which you're determined. The dominant neoliberal kind of model is to completely obfuscate all that, and so you're just free. And if there's free choice, why do capitalists spend so much money on advertising and branding? Because they know that people, what they can appeal to, the very thing that most controls people, is the appeal to the people's freedom, etc., etc. You know, what inaugurates the world we live in now? 1984, the Apple advert, the famous Apple advert, directed by Ridley Scott, where you have, this world, clearly based on Orwell, with this kind of grey drones sitting around, and along comes this kind of woman dressed in Apple colours, who's an athlete who throws this hammer into the big grey, dismal control screens, which both represent kind of IBM, those kind of big monolithic, forms of kind of old school technology companies, and also kind of the Soviet system or whatever. They're compacted together as representing the old world. The new world will be one where you're free to choose, where no one can tell you what to do. So what is the objective marker of this? Is the amount of depression amongst young people, which is increasing all of the time. If young people are so happy in this new world, and they're just why are they so depressed? And I would say, depression, which many young people suffer from, is the evidence of Spinoza, the accuracy of Spinoza's thought, that no one chooses to be depressed, as it were. And when you are depressed, that you can't really choose your way out of this. That there's a kind of series of blocks and impasses, etc., which you can't get out of. And, so it's mere voluntarism, mere choice is not enough. And I think that, that because of the constant inundated pressure on the social brain all the time, that the capacity for that at a collective level is very limited. but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen. But I think we need to find a break somehow in this endless flow, inundated flow, in order that we can have agency as opposed to the illusion of free choice. Right time is consistency versus cut-off. It's not about slow versus fast, because we've got a slow, fast world where we've got just massive kind of speed of stuff coming into us, producing inertial glacial slowness in culture. And so slowness is an alternative to it. It's already there. What we have is, in a way, the difference between cut-up as a constant mode of a kind of incoherent and stimuli which cannot be montaged together, into a kind of totality, versus consistency. Well, consistency is, where one can be absorbed, one can, and an absorption time can feel really quick. When you're absorbed in something, when you're in a creative process or whatever, you feel something taking over you. You feel you're running to catch up with it. Time actually speeds up. I would say my sense of time, is we're all like computers now, whose memory is overloaded. So everything's slow and creaky. Everything's slow and creaky. As I live in London, where you just, where even walking down the street is an Odyssean quest, and it's an illusion because everyone's running around and something's happening there. But actually, they're running around. The more that people run around, the harder it is for anyone to actually get anything done, and the less you can achieve in time, I think. Communication technology is the thing that's taken over your life. Like most other technologies, medical technologies have improved good. Right, that's good. Right, communication technology, why has that taken over your life? And why do you imagine that will persist forever? There are hard limits. There are hard limits of the organism. You can't go on forever inundating the brain with more and more stimuli, and the human organism can cope with that. It's not possible to extrapolate from the cyber blitz of the last 10 decades and imagine that it will continue at the same rate of acceleration. It cannot. So something will break. Something will break. I mean, Berardi's argument is an interesting one. He argues that the dot-com crash of the late 90s, the turn millennium, was caused by depression. Because the people couldn't. Okay, so for Berardi, the argument is, why did 90s was a decade of the emergence of cyberspace and of Prozac, And for him, there's two things are totally related together. How did people cope with these new level of demands that were placed upon them? They started to take antidepressants, which are now very common, particularly amongst young people. Antidepressants as a hazing thing, which you can hear this like this downer haze. That's why Drake is really interesting. The new Drake record, full of this kind of electro downer haze. Everyone's on downers now to cope with the just cyber blitz, whether it's antidepressants or other forms of kind of self-medication, in order to cope with this. And the thing is that there's a breakdown at the end of the 90s, according to Berardi. There will be a breakdown. We cannot cope with this. There's already the point is that there is this privatization of stress. It's normalized. The fact that young people are depressed, who gives a shit? This is the idea. Young people are depressed, that's just part of life. It wasn't part of life. It was not part of life. The increase of the depression amongst young people is shocking. And that ought to be the biggest possible indicator on condemnation of the world in which we're now living. What we've got now as a result of, let's be clear about this, as a result of this frenzied overstimulation of the neural cortex of the collective brain. What we have though is not, let's not be clear, it's not a massively accelerated culture, but a very slowed down culture, a very homogenous culture, a very predictable culture where nothing new ever happens. So I would think, yes, we want to go back to a future where new things happen, but you do that by de-binging of communication technology, which is a decelerant as a cultural influence, I would argue. And so, I mean, what I think we may come to see this period of communication communication binging is precisely that, as a form of binging. It's just like speed, like amphetamine. In the 50s, doctors prescribed it for anything, particularly to women. You got a bit of anxiety, have some speed. Oh, you want to lose some weight, have some speed. It sort of worked, but then there was downsides of people getting up and cleaning the house at 3 a.m, that kind of thing, And I think there's a very serious side to this kind of techno-amphetamine which we're on, and a constant panic kind of temporality that is imposed by this combination, as I said, of mandatory kind of entrepreneurialism arising from precarious working conditions, and social conditions. The sense that anything can be snatched away from us at any time, that things are just getting worse, and we've got to be grateful even for the small things that which we have got. You know, years ago people had security, you know, but that's all gone now. And you know, particularly for you know, younger people mostly who are here today, this is the story you're told. Well, you know, we had a bit of security and a nice life, but your life's going to be worse than ours. Sorry about that. This is the message, right? This is the message. And what you're going to have to do is compete with one another in order to, you know, sorry about that, we just haven't got enough for all of you. Sorry, but you must compete with one another for the little bit that's going to be left in the future. And, you know, it's a horrible picture, really. You know, in the 19th century, anarchists were already calculating how much work you'd need to do in order to satisfy basic human needs and desires, and even then they were saying 20 hours a week. Now, with the massive increases in technology, this ought to be really vanishing. The amount of necessary work ought to be very small. Why are we doing more work than ever then? What's that about? There's clearly there's a kind of political economic drive which has nothing to do with the technological capacities of the human beings have got now. The depressing thing about Breaking Bad, which if people haven't seen it, I mean, I guess some of you have seen it, you know, is about a chemistry school teacher in the US who gets lung cancer. And who decides, well, I obviously can't pay for my healthcare, so I'll have to think, what should I do? Then I'll just start cooking crystal meth in order to pay for the health bills. And you know, I think this highlights, as it were, the evil, well, I don't really want to use that. Use the word evil; it's too theological. It highlights, you know, what is so awful about neoliberalism. The neoliberalism is a counter-progressive, you know, political development. Ken Loach's film, you know, Spirit of 45, I think that's the twin of Breaking Bad in many ways. You know, where you know, where Loach shows suddenly, you know, after the Second World War in England, partly because of the war, and partly also because of, you know, organised working class movements, suddenly the working class could have this progressive modern agenda where they didn't have to pay for healthcare anymore. They didn't have to pay for doctors, that'll be provided for them. You know, this is a progressive move, a civilized move, a move to increase civilization. You know, neoliberalism is a crude, you know, a savage attack on civilization, of basic of human progress.